Hey, TechKnowStuds. You know, for TLS to work, it needs to establish some parameters in communications, and it does that all with the TLS Handshake Protocol. So in this video, let's get into the TLS Handshake Protocol. We're going to jump back and forth a little bit between TLS 1.2 and TLS 1.3. We're mainly going to be talking about TLS 1.3 because that's the most recent version. However, TLS 1.2 gives us some perspective, and so we're going to take a look at TLS 1.2 process. We'll get into TLS 1.3, the process, the packets, the key exchange, server parameters, and authentication. When it comes to the TLS record protocol, we satisfy this confidentiality and integrity. But how do we know we're connecting to the right device? That authenticity piece or authentication piece. And how do we coordinate the cipher suite and the keys? Well, the answer to that is through this handshake protocol. We need the TLS handshake protocol for that key exchange, for negotiating cryptographic parameters, and for the authentication piece. Let's take a look at the TLS handshake process. It's more specifically the TLS 1.2 handshake process. Now realize we're going to pick things up after TCP has already made its connection. So this client has already reached out to the server and made a TCP connection, and the three-way handshake has already happened from a TCP perspective. So we already have layer 4 connectivity and we have established a connection. Then that's when TLS steps into place. TLS is going to start out with the client sending a client hello. The server will send a server hello back, a certificate, and a server key exchange, and a server hello done. Then the client is going to send a client key exchange, a change cipher spec, and a finished. And then the server is going to send a change cipher spec back with a finished, and finally data can be sent back and forth. Now the white lettering is where we have encryption happening. So we don't get to the encrypted data until much further along in this process, which can cause a few different problems that people see some of the exchange that's happening. So we want to cut down on that. Now let's take a look at it from a Wireshark perspective. What I'm showing you here is a snippet from Wireshark, and it's not the digging into the actual packets, but it's the packets that are flowing back and forth. And here we see that TCP handshake right from the get-go. So we see the three-way handshake that establishes a communication. Then that's when TLS version 1.2 comes into play. We see the client hello, the server says hello back, sends a certificate, that's for that RSA verification piece that happens there. There's a server key exchange and a server hello done. From there, the client steps in, sends a client key exchange, a change cipher spec, and an encrypted handshake message. So this is where we start the encryption. So the finished part of this is encrypted when is sent in from an encrypted standpoint. So you can see how this lines up with everything we just talked about. So let's take a look at what TLS 1.3 looks like versus TLS 1.2. As I already mentioned, we don't get to the encrypted part until further on in the message. Also, we have a lot of communication that happens before we actually start communicating the data. So TLS 1.3 sets out to have less communication back and forth and encrypt things faster. And so what do we see with TLS 1.3? Well, first of all, we see a client hello. We see the server says hello. We exchange the server parameters and authentication. We have the client sending an authentication, and then data is getting back and forth. So data is flowing much sooner. Our transferring the data is happening much sooner. Plus what we have is encryption happening much sooner as well. The handshake for TLS 1.3 can be thought of as three different phases. First of all, we have the key exchange, then we get into the server parameters, and then the authentication piece. The key exchange is that asymmetric cryptography. This is that initial encryption, sending encrypted data much sooner in the process. So that's the initial key exchange. Then we get into the server parameters, and the server parameters is going to be setting up that long-term encryption, the cipher suite that we're going to use to encrypt things, that symmetrical encryption that we're going to use long term. And then we have that authentication piece. The server needs to prove that they are the site that they say they are. And there is an optional client verification as well. Let's first take a look at the key exchange phase. We want to get things encrypted right away. So the exchanging of keys needs to happen right away as well. We need to have it right here in the client hello and the server hello. And that's what we see here. Here's the first packet right here, which is the client hello. Here's the second packet, which also includes the server hello. And within here are the key exchanges. So this could be a pre-shared key, or it could be one of the Diffie-Hellman. And so it will exchange that and then start using those keys right away for the encryption and encrypting starting at the server parameters. When it comes to TLS 1.3, there's a few different options for key exchange. A couple of them are a couple different types of Diffie-Hellman, and one of them is a pass key. The Diffie-Hellman is for servers that have never communicated before, versus a pass key would be set up in advance. So you set up a pass key on each of the devices. Now, when it comes to visiting websites, you're pretty much talking about the key share being Diffie-Hellman. That is, you're probably not going to have a pre-shared key set up with these different websites. And so let's take a look at what that looks like. This is the client hello packet. This is a Wireshark capture. We can see all the information that falls into this client hello packet, but most of the information is closed. We're not taking an in-depth look into anything here. We just want to take a look at the key share. This is the client doing the key share, the Diffie-Hellman key share with the server, and the server is going to reciprocate that. And then it uses that Diffie-Hellman key exchange to come up with a unique key that they're going to start encrypting data right away with. Using the Diffie-Hellman key exchange to have a shared key amongst the servers is not the ideal way of encrypting all your data, because it's too slow and time intensive. And so what we need to do is we need to establish the next step. And so this server is going to determine what those parameters are for encrypting data from here on out. And that's where we see the server parameters. It's going to come up with the TLS version that's going to be used. It's going to come up with the cipher suite that will be used, the keys that will be used, and ask possibly for client authentication if it wants to ask for client authentication. So it's going to come up with these server parameters and tell the client. But it does need to establish a TLS version and a cipher suite that's going to be acceptable to the client. So it needs to know what the client capabilities are. So within this client hello packet, we also see some information about the client's capabilities, the versions, the TLS versions it can use, and the supported cipher suites. So if we take a look at the client hello packet again, we can see what the client capabilities are. We see the cipher suites that it can handle, that it's capable of handling. We also see in this supported versions down here, we see the supported versions of TLS. And it doesn't show all of them here, but we can see right at the bottom here that it has different TLS versions that it will support. Then the server will send back the server parameters. And so we can see that in here. We see the server hello right here. Then we have a change cipher suite, and then we see application data. And remember, the application data at that point in time, it's encrypted. We can see that it's encrypted right here. So I would like to open this up and show you what's actually inside, but you can't see it on here because it's all encrypted. Then we have phase 3, the authentication phase. In this phase, we go through the authentication process, and the server will authenticate itself, and then there's this optional client authentication. So let's take a look at what the authentication piece looks like in our Wireshark. And I can't really show you what TLS 1.3 looks like because it's all encrypted at this point in time. That communication is encrypted. So it just looks like encrypted data. So let's take a look at TLS version 1.2, which is not encrypted at this point in time in the communication. So here's the Wireshark. We can see the client hello and then the server hello, and then we get to the certificate. Because really, that's largely, at least if you're visiting a website, what you're authenticating is that server certificate, that PKI, the public key infrastructure. So let's take a look at the certificate and what that looks like. we actually have two certificates here. Here's one certificate, and here's the second certificate within this packet. The first certificate, I just chose a random site for this, that's governmentjobs.com. So the first certificate is for the site itself. And then the second certificate is going to be the intermediary certificate. We can see the information for that right there. So what does this look like from an end user perspective? They've visited the site. This packet has come over with these two certificates in it. If they were to click the link next to the URL and view these certificates, they would see the two certificates and all the information for the certificates. This is the intermediary certificate that we saw come over in that certificate packet. This is the site certificate. I can click one of these and it would give that information, list out all of that information here in the fields section of this. And so I can view the different information that these certificates have inside of them. I wouldn't even need to go into the Wireshark and take a look at it. I also have this root certificate right here, which is installed on my machine. That root certificate would validate this intermediary certificate, which would then validate this site certificate. And now I have a certain sense, a certain verification that as long as I trust this root certificate, and that root certificate trusts the intermediary, and the intermediary trusts this site, now I have a certain sense that the site is legitimate. What I've done is I've just proven the authenticity of the information coming to me from these servers, and that these servers are the servers that should be delivering that information. So now I've accomplished that. The handshake also has accomplished transferring information, that server information, to establish the parameters for the cipher suites that we're going to use, which will then establish our confidentiality and integrity. In this video, we covered TLS 1.2 process and the TLS 1.3 process. We did a little jumping around between the 1.2 and 1.3, but essentially we talked about TLS 1.3, the process, its packets, key exchange, server parameters, and the authentication piece.